Danny Sheehan, on a recent interview with Jimmy Church, said that, well, let me just read it. I was alerted to this. I watched the full interview and somehow I missed this, but on Twitter reminded me what I had been missing. So Danny Sheehan says he fundamentally disagrees with Stephen Greer that humans have been flying these things around for all this time, and most of the sightings are not even ET. That's a direct quote. So yeah, that's what Stephen Greer said, is that most of these sightings are not even ET, and that humans have been flying around for a while on these things. Now, I think that, it could be a little bit of both, right? There could be humans flying around for all this time in exotic craft that the mainstream mogul world is not aware of. I think that's totally possible and maybe even likely. If indeed Richard Nolan's concept of the breakaway civilization is correct, that the Area 51 guys, whatever you want to call them, that they have, allied with the beings, or they're working with the beings, and they have just over the years, over the decades, just developed a completely separate culture with high technology. Maybe they're in space doing stuff with a secret space fleet. But at any rate, they are very advanced and completely divorced from mainstream culture and society. That's the idea behind that. Now, if that is true and real, then Stephen Greer is right in the sense that, sure, humans have been flying around doing stuff for a long time. However, they have been working with the beings to accomplish that, and the beings are here and they're driving around or flying around, doing whatever they're doing as well, and probably in much, much greater numbers. Remember the poll, the Roper poll conducted by Bud Hopkins and David Jacobs in the 90s, and then David Jacobs further comments on that poll, where the implications of all of that are that at least 5% of the populace of the world are abductees. They're contactees, abductees, whatever you want to call them. So that's hundreds of millions of people. So it's probably not humans doing that. Yeah, there's beings up there with a massive involvement with humanity, massive, overwhelming involvement with humanity. They are doing some massive project, whatever that is, whether that's restoring their race or altering our race or becoming us. I don't know. But they're doing something, and they're here in force, and they're flying around, and they go underwater, they go through the ground. They're all over the place. So I totally disagree with Stephen Greer on that. Danny Sheehan says, my own opinion is, based on what I know, is they don't really know how to make it work because it has a metaphysical dimension to it, a transpersonal dimension to the technology. It functions with telepathy in the form of subtle energy fields in stuff they don't understand. The fact is they're buffaloed by this stuff. So that's an amazing comment by Danny. And I love his use of the words subtle energy. He says the ships, the craft, the alien vehicles, or the vehicles of the beings use functions with telepathy in the form of subtle energy fields. So, subtle energy is another word for, chi or prana, vril, ki. I am a Reiki master at this point. I just became a Reiki master recently, and I've been studying it for about, over a year. And, I wish I knew more about it. I'm a Reiki master. You would think that I would know all there is to know about it, but it's a very mysterious force. I mean, it is the force from Star Wars is based on the concept of chi and all of this stuff. And I had thought that was a fantasy all of my life until the last few years when I discovered the reality of it. And I was shocked and blown away and just fell in love. I mean, the force is real. I mean, as a Star Wars nerd and as an atheist up until that point, when I felt this spiritual energy coming from somewhere, I was really blown away, and it was just hard to express how blown away I was by that. So, if you've never had Reiki done, I encourage you to check it out. You may have to shop around for the right person and go a few times before you feel it or get the confirmation of its effectiveness or reality. But anyway, in the realm of energy healing and in the metaphysical disciplines and what have you, they often use the word subtle energy. So, and that also applies to things like telepathy and stuff like that. So his use of that here, telepathy. Let me go back to the quote. The ships function with telepathy in the form of subtle energy fields. So, I assume he's using subtle energy in the sense of the word that it's, commonly used. This magical, mystical force, chi, prana, vril, whatever you want to call it. So, but he's saying it operates in fields, which is really intriguing. I don't know what that means exactly. In Reiki, we I don't know how to generate a field. Maybe others do. So, I guess theoretically, yes, I know how to generate a field, but I mean, that's not how we would call it or phrase it, generally speaking. But sometimes might want to conjure a protective, sphere or whatever, and you could call that a field. But that's not going to power a UFO, I would not think. So it's interesting to look back on historical cases and instances where we might have heard these UFOs tied with mystical forces, specifically chi or whatever you want to call it. There's not a lot of material on that. There's a wealth of material tying UFOs to metaphysical phenomena in general, and placing UFOs in the beings in this much bigger picture with dimensions and mystical stuff going on. But you don't normally hear about UFOs powered or having anything to do with chi or ki or whatever you want to call it. Part of me still likes the Force. So that's really interesting. The only instance I can really think of is, there's various versions of events of how the Germans, the whole German narrative in World War II, the Vril Society, the society of women who were interested in Vril and possibly able to use it, and they were psychics and mediums using, mental abilities, much as Danny Sheehan is saying they're using telepathy. In that case, they were using another mental form, discipline, a spiritual / mental discipline. They were mediums, and they call themselves the Vril Society. And there are various versions of events that tie them in with the Germans creating UFOs and working with beings and whatever. I have no idea which of those stories is true, if any of them. But that's the only example I can think of with energy, subtle energy, being connected to UFOs. So I hope that Danny Sheehan or somebody expounds on that, because I find that really fascinating. And anyway, let me move on. I wanted to highlight, a comment by Garry Nolan, who says he's replying to somebody. This is on Twitter. I'll provide the thread. Somebody is commenting on Danny's remarks. He says, I'm with Danny 100%. I'd even speculate the key to the craft originates from the other dimension. We're at the discretion of the other side. And Garry Nolan, famous scientist Garry Nolan, says, I have often wondered whether the power, the engine, etc. is, as you say, on the other side. So, if Danny is correct about using subtle energy, if that is in any way like Reiki, like the Reiki energy, which means ki, Reiki means universal life force, part of that is two words put together. One of those words is ki or chi. It literally means the force. So, but in Reiki, there's this concept, this energy is all around us. It binds the universe together, right? Permeates us and binds the universe together. But you also channel it from elsewhere. You're channeling it from outside of the reality that we can perceive on a day-to-day basis. What that means exactly, I don't know. I've never been there. When I get there, I'll let you know. If the other side wants me to, if that ever happens for me. And if you've been to the other side, and if you have any insight into that, if you're into out-of-body experiences or what have you, and if you have any insight into this stuff, I would love to get your feedback, because this is where you get to see the crossover of the metaphysical and the alien, or whatever you want to call it. Because there's a huge crossover, and I talk about that all the time. And this is potentially a really great example of that. I'm really curious what Danny Sheehan's sources are. And, I guess we'll have to wait to find out on that. But fascinating comments. I do have to add a little bit. He says that we haven't been able to get the ships to work. And I think that it's very likely there's different groups doing different things. And there's a group that has some recovered craft, and they've been tinkering with them. And maybe they've been getting a few things to work here and there. But on the whole, Danny is completely right. But then there's the whole other group. The whole completely other group, the breakaway group. If that exists, then that's a whole different level. And, that's secret space fleet stuff. And, we've got ships and all that kind of stuff, if that is correct. Terry Lovelace in his story, and others like him, very credible people checked out by Lou Elizondo. Terry Lovelace saw 50 or more military guys aboard a giant UFO, which doesn't equate to secret space fleet and breakaway civilization, but it definitely leans very strongly in that direction. So I just wanted to add that caveat, my own take on what Danny had to say about us not being able to fly anything, versus Stephen Greer's it's all us. I'll go into my anti-Stephen Greer rant on another time. I think he's done a lot of good for the community, but he also has done a lot of harm throwing around, anyway, I don't want to go there. But that's my take on all of this. Is a really interesting story. Let me know what you think about it. I think this is super fascinating. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Please smash the subscribe button and hit the bell so you don't miss a single video. Please join me on social media. There's Facebook and Twitter links below. And please, if you enjoy these videos, please consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel member. See the first line in the description below, and there's 2 tiers of membership to receive exclusive access in videos. Until next time, this is Jack with Cosmic Road.